to Window Bed, the show that unironically promotes the world's most hated audio tools. In 2018, Teenage Engineering released their OPZ. They called it the Dream Machine, but for many it was more of a nightmare, especially anybody with red-green color blindness or an appreciation for manufacturing standards. This year they released the highly anticipated follow-up, the OPXY, which makes this nightmare available for all sighted people and makes the nightmare available for anybody who's concerned about their financial well-being.
All right, thank you all for putting up with me. So I wanted to make a video for anybody who's looking to be discouraged from buying an OPXY. And that's because I like this thing. I also got it for free, and I'm going to continue to make videos about it. And I don't necessarily want people to get the idea that this is super easy to use, or that it's straightforward, or that it's some huge departure from the usual sort of teenage engineering things that get on most people's nerves. I'll start off with one of the weaker ones, which is just that right now there are a lot of bugs. And I know that they're working on it, but it is, my favorite engine is the Multisampler, and right now it is borderline unusable. I still use it, but if you load more than one or two, you're bound to have issues. Let's just go ahead and do it. So I'm going to load my acoustic guitar sample. And then in this slot, I will go ahead and load maybe one of my bass guitar samples. Oh, it's already happening. So it's decided not to include notes past a certain point. Oh, or it just didn't load this E. And that just happens. That happens all the time right now. And maybe they'll fix that, maybe not. But right now, multi-samples that you record don't even auto-trim appropriately, even if you use a threshold to start the recording. And the other engines do. So right now, even my favorite part of this has a lot of bugs and a lot of things that I'm just personally willing to put up with because I got it for free. And also this is going to be my main workstation because this is the upgrade I was waiting for. While it's really cool that they have these engines that you can use just to control external instruments, they're pretty wonky right now. Let me show you what it's... Actually, I guess I haven't tried this since they've done this update. But here, let me... Yeah, so you can't decrease this. When you go downward, nothing happens. I don't know if you can even see that on the screen. If you increase this, that happens. If you decrease it, it continues to go up. Oh, but hey, now at least it stops at 40. Oh, so yeah, okay, so that's actually an improvement, believe it or not. So my point is that there's still a lot of wonky stuff, and the LFO on this does nothing right now as far as I can tell and as far as other people can tell. There's basic functions that aren't there yet, like you can't parameter lock the drums yet. You can't, by which I mean you can't change it so it's just on one step, and this was definitely something you could do on OPZ, and I don't have any insight. I would imagine this is coming in the future, but my point is that this is a basic function that if you're wanting this to be a complete machine right out of the box, it just absolutely isn't yet. And who knows what it'll be like in the future. I'll still be making videos about it though. There's a lot of small things like that that will probably improve, but that doesn't mean that every single thing that I'm going to mention in this video is like that where it could change in the future. That's just something that, at least for right now, if you need encouragement to not buy this in the short term, it is very incomplete. They don't even have graphics for any of the effects. I don't actually know if that's coming or not. It just seems really unlike them to not visually represent this when they visually represented all of the synths. I've heard some people talk about the sampler as though there's a chance that they're going to add some longer audio track or extremely long samples. Right now, it seems like you can do 20 seconds per key, but there are some limits. You're going to run into buffer issues and all that stuff. So I don't know what the actual limitations are. I've run into them many, many, many times, but they're kind of hard to predict. So that's a little wonky, but if you're then thinking, oh, they're definitely going to increase the recording length, or they're going to make it so you can record a whole audio track, I do not see that ever happening on OPXY. And that's just because that's what OP1 is designed around. It is streamlined around that exact idea. And I don't know, maybe they have that in the works, but it just seems so contrary to the way that XY is designed that I would be pretty surprised if that's the route that they were going. So if you're expecting it to be able to do what an Octatrack can do in that sense, I would say, please don't buy this. The next thing I want to emphasize is that if you think this is just an upgraded OPZ, it's kind of an entirely different thing. Like, there's a reason they didn't call it the OPZ field. And while it does a lot more than OPZ and does address a lot of people's complaints, it's a completely different beast. I think a lot of people found OPZ easier to use with the app, but I found the app pretty limiting. If you think that a built-in screen is going to make it a lot easier to use than the OPZ, that is incorrect. It is so difficult to read these words. It's hard to give an appropriate scale on this, but like, imagine if somebody had, written the word MIDI on your fingernail at that size where it can fit 15 times or something like that. It's just hard to tell what different things are. And honestly, I need to lean forward and kind of away from my mic to even be able to read some of the smaller things right there, especially for me if there's a glare. Even though it says what the step components do, step components are still very tricky. So these are the thing that I kind of specialize in. Let me just show you kind of a neat trick. I'm going to play a chord, and I'm going to get this chord to play, let's say I'll hold it for... Let's have it hold for a count of 3 times. So I know that the way I actually do that is I do a hold 3 and a pulse 9. Let's make it a little bit slower so we can tell. And if that seemed really weird and kind of unpredictable to you, it's not going to help you to be able to see hold step 3 times and then repeat step 9 times, because also this is going to behave differently. If I want that to play 5 times 3, I would actually change the pulse to 5. So they do have a logic, but having the screen doesn't make that logic more apparent. Speaking of step components, a lot of people have asked me about exporting tracks and exporting MIDI, and I just don't think that that's going to happen. And the reason why is what we just saw with the step component. How would you export this? Now, this one might make sense. You're going to be able, maybe it could record it out internally or something and figure out how long it's going to hold those notes for. But what if I make it so it's only randomly going to do that? How would that be represented in an exported track? Now, it could be represented in an XY project, that's for sure, but I don't know how it would create a MIDI track based on this. I think you're always going to have to record MIDI out from here. And that was the case on OPZ. Somebody did make Underbridge, and supposedly it's really cool, but I was never able to get it to fully work, and I do such weird stuff with step components that I'd rather just record the audio and save the project on OPZ where I'm able to edit the step components and stuff like that. A lot of settings aren't where you would expect them. So for example, if you've ever used an OP1, the system menu is going to be over here. The system menu is instead under COM, which does something slightly different than it does on OP1. So there's just some things where even if you're familiar with teenage engineering devices, it might throw you off. And it's still, even with the screen, going to take some learning. In other words, while there is a screen, I feel like I've had to almost memorize more on the XY, being like, okay, these settings are over here. If I want to sequence the volume, I got to open up the mixer page. But if I was already on aux tracks and I open the mixer page, it'll show me the instrument track, so I got to remember to hit it twice. There's just a lot of weird things here that I'm okay with learning and I'm okay with taking the time to memorize, but it's not necessarily easier than OPZ or any of their other instruments. If you are unable to hear a track, let me just tell you the few ways that I can think of off the top of my head as a beginner at the device that could happen. Maybe your preset's muted. Maybe you held this down and then you, boom, press the track number and you're able to hear it, but it's not going to play any of that MIDI for you. Or maybe it does. Here we go. Oh, right, because we had that. Another example, I believe that it was because I was starting on a different scene than what I had pulled up at the time. And so that's another way that it could just be a little bit complicated. That could have happened, so you could have muted it that way. You could have muted it by pressing down that button, by hitting this encoder when you had this page up. You could have muted it by turning that encoder down. You could have muted it by sending it out of the aux track. There's a lot of different ways, and some of these are more likely than others, but my point is that I'm spending a lot of time having to troubleshoot stuff like that, and I don't mind, but if that's not the experience you're looking for, then I would say don't get an XY. This one might just be a me thing, but I still don't get arranger mode, and I have been trying for a while now to really understand how we're meant to make a song on this. And like, I get how to do it, and I've succeeded a few times, but it seems like a more painful process than on the OPZ, and I don't really understand why. It's great being able to see, the order of the different tracks or the different scenes that you're going through, and it's cool that you can have up to 99 scenes, but it's weird that you have to go to each scene and then like load the patterns that you want for that scene, and you can't just copy scenes. My point is that the arranger just feels really wonky, and I understand the basics of it, but I haven't figured out how to use it in a way that's any easier than just, creating a linear pattern. My point is that this is not a perfect device, and you're hearing we're all beginners. Everybody who has one right now is a beginner, and we're all excited about it. And so my main focus is, and will still be, what can this do? But I just wanted to take a minute and take this video to really emphasize there's a lot it doesn't do. And if you're looking for a reason not to buy it, I would say I'm only going to recommend this to people who are like, yes, I like the OPZ's sequencer, and yes, I'm willing to deal with a lot of bugs and a lot more menu diving. And that's me. Weirdly enough, I'm fine with all of that, and I actually really like it, but I just know that a lot of people will be disappointed if they come in thinking oh, this is, the OPZ upgrade that solves all the OPZ's issues, or if they come in thinking that maybe, in other words, at the first glance, OPXY is ticking none of the boxes. So don't buy one, save your money, and hopefully this video helps you in your quest to not impulse buy a $2,300 product.